Something happened last night at MetLife Stadium in New Jersey that has nothing to do with a soccer ball rolling into a net and everything to do with power, money, and politics wearing a yellow jersey. Brazil is out of the World Cup. Not eliminated by Argentina, not by France, not by anyone the history books would call a rival. Eliminated by Norway, 2-1 in the round of 16. And if you think the story ends there, you have not been paying attention to what has been happening behind the scenes of this tournament for weeks. Because this defeat is not just about missed penalties and a young striker who froze in front of the goalkeeper. This is about a World Cup that has been shadowed by a sitting American president cozying up to the man who runs global soccer, about a federation more interested in protecting a contract than admitting a mistake, and about a golden generation of Brazilian talent that may have just watched its best chance slip away for good. Let's start with the match itself, because what unfolded on the field set the stage for everything that came after. Brazil walked into this round of 16 as favorites. They had topped their group, they had grinded past Japan in the previous round, and they had Vinicius Junior in career best form carrying 4 goals into the knockout stage. On paper, this was a formality. On the field, it became a disaster that will be replayed in Brazilian sports television for years. 14 minutes into the match, Brazil won a penalty. Referee Ismail Fat pointed to the spot after a clumsy challenge inside the box. And after a video review confirmed the call, Brazil had the perfect chance to seize control early. Norway was still finding its footing, still organizing its defensive shape. This was the moment. And then something strange happened. The ball did not go to Vinicius Junior, the tournament's most dangerous Brazilian attacker. It went to midfielder Bruno Guimarães. Norwegian goalkeeper Ørjan Nyland read the stutter step run perfectly and saved it without much trouble. In that single moment, the wheels started coming off for Brazil. And the question that exploded across every radio station, every group chat, and every sports desk in the country was brutally simple. Why wasn't Vinicius Junior the one taking that kick? Head coach Carlo Ancelotti answered it directly in his post-match press conference, and his answer only threw fuel onto the fire. He said the coaching staff had reviewed a full year of penalty statistics, and that the ranking in order was Rafinha, who was injured and unavailable, followed by Neymar, Igor Thiago, Bruno Guimarães, and Gabriel Martinelli. Vinicius Junior, according to Ancelotti's own numbers, did not crack the top 5. Stop and sit with that for a second. Vinicius Junior converted 13 of 19 penalties across his club career and had recently signed a new deal at Real Madrid. Yet, in the eyes of his own national team coach, he ranked below 4 teammates when it mattered most. His international penalty record is admittedly rough, having missed 2 of his last 3 attempts for the Seleção, including one against Venezuela back in 2024. The numbers are real, but numbers rarely explain why this stings so much. This wasn't a quiet decision buried in a locker room conversation. It was announced publicly by name with the team already eliminated, while Vinicius Junior sat in the room listening to his own coach rank him below his teammates on live television. Ancelotti's own assistant, his son, and fellow member of the coaching staff later defended the call as standard procedure, insisting the penalty order is always set before kickoff and communicated to players in advance, technically sound. Emotionally impossible to swallow for a fan base that watched its most informed players stand on the pitch, available, experienced, and simply passed over. If that penalty miss was the worst moment of the night for Brazil, it was quickly overshadowed by a number that stunned soccer analysts everywhere. Brazil finished the match with just 34% possession. 34. That is the lowest possession share in the entire history of Brazilian World Cup participation, lower than any match played by Pelé, lower than any match played by Ronaldo, lower than any recorded difficult night in the country's storied tournament history. The nation that invented the beautiful game, reduced to chasing shadows against a Norwegian side that had not lost in 5 straight matches heading into this one. Ancelotti had built his game plan around a deep defensive block and quick counterattacks, hoping to exploit the speed of Vinicius Junior and Rodrigo in transition. On paper, it made sense. On the field, Norway was simply smarter. They compressed the middle of the pitch, closed off passing lanes, and waited patiently for their opening. That opening came in the 79th minute. Norwegian winger Seelup drove down the right flank, reached the byline, and whipped in a pinpoint cross to the back post. Erling Haaland, showing exactly why he is considered the most lethal number 9 in the world right now, outjumped Gabriel Magalhaes and powered a header past goalkeeper Alisson. 1-0 Norway. Ancelotti reacted immediately, sending on Neymar in the 82nd minute and pushing everything forward in search of an equalizer. It nearly worked. Chaotic, desperate, all in soccer. But in the dying seconds of regulation, Haaland delivered the final blow. A low-driven shot from the edge of the box, hugging the left post, giving Alisson absolutely no chance. 2-0. Brazil's World Cup dream was effectively finished. Those 2 goals pushed Haaland to 9 goals for the tournament, tying him for the Golden Boot race and cementing his status as the most feared striker left in the competition. Reports out of Norway this week suggest scouts across Europe have taken notice, though nobody expected the biggest headline of the night to come from his own father. While the match was still being played, Erling Haaland's father, Alf Inge Haaland, was approached by a reporter outside the stadium and asked directly about his son's future. His answer was carefully vague but impossible to ignore. Everybody wants to play for Real Madrid, he said, without closing any doors and without denying anything. Think about the irony sitting inside that sentence. Carlo Ancelotti, the very man who coached Real Madrid until just over a year ago, had just been eliminated from the World Cup by the player whose father was hinting at a future move to Ancelotti's old club. This is not just idle transfer gossip either. Multiple European outlets have reported in the days since that Real Madrid's leadership under new manager Jose Mourinho has quietly given the green light to explore a blockbuster deal for Haaland if Vinicius Junior eventually leaves the Bernabeu. Fabrizio Romano, one of the most trusted names in transfer reporting, has said publicly that a move this year is extremely unlikely given Haaland's long-term contract in Manchester, but he has not ruled out a future switch entirely. For now, this remains speculation, not confirmed fact, fueled by a father's off-the-cuff comment and a rumor mill that never stops turning in Spanish soccer media. Buried underneath the penalty controversy and the Haaland fireworks was a heartbreaking moment for 20-year-old forward Caio Hendrick, seen by many as the long-term heir to Neymar's number 10 shirt. Brought on to add pace and directness to a stagnant attack, Hendrick found himself clean through on goal in one of those rare, career-defining one-on-one opportunities. Nyland read the situation perfectly, closed the angle, and denied him. It wasn't a lack of talent. It was the crushing weight of a World Cup knockout match, landing on young shoulders that are still learning how to carry it. And then there is Neymar. What happened with Brazil's all-time leading scorer in the final minutes of this match is the story that will be remembered long after the penalty controversy fades. In the 10th minute of second-half stoppage time, with Brazil already down 2 goals and staring elimination in the face, referee Fat pointed to the spot again after a reckless challenge inside the box. This time, the ball went to Neymar. With his signature stutter step run, he sent Nyland the wrong way and buried it into the corner. 1-2, too little, far too late to change the result, but more than enough to close a 16-year chapter in the most fitting way possible. MetLife Stadium was the very venue where Neymar made his senior international debut back in 2010 in a friendly against the United States. 16 years and 130 appearances later, in that same stadium, in that same city, his international career came to an end. Speaking to reporters minutes after the final whistle, eyes red and voice cracking, he said simply, I tried. I started here. I finished here. Now it's over." He walks away as Brazil's all-time top scorer with 80 goals, a record that once belonged to Pelé himself and the second most capped player in national team history behind only Cafu. His international career was one of staggering brilliance, paired with equally staggering heartbreak, injured in the opening match of the 2014 World Cup on home soil before that infamous 7-1 semifinal collapse against Germany. Fully fit, but tactically neutralized in the 2018 quarterfinal loss to Belgium. Battling through injury again in Qatar in 2022 before Brazil fell to Croatia on penalties. And now, at 34 years old, arriving at his final World Cup, already carrying physical limitations, managing just 2 substitute appearances across the entire tournament before delivering one final, symbolic goal in the last minute of his final match. He becomes only the second Brazilian after Pelé himself to score at 4 separate World Cups. The trophy that would have completed his legacy simply never arrived. Neymar's future now shifts fully to his club career with Santos, which he continues to evaluate on a season-by-season basis, according to people close to the situation. Now for the numbers that Brazilian soccer executives desperately do not want printed in bold letters this week. Brazil has not reached a World Cup semifinal since Russia 2018 when Belgium eliminated them in the quarterfinals. Before that came the infamous 7-1 collapse against Germany at home in 2014. Then came a penalty shootout loss to Croatia in Qatar in 2022. And now a round of 16 exit to Norway in 2026, 4 consecutive World Cups without reaching the Final Four. The only nation with 5 World Cup titles to its name has now gone 4 straight tournaments without sniffing a semifinal. Dig one layer deeper and the number gets worse. The last time Brazil was eliminated this early, in the round of 16, was at Italy in 1990 against Argentina. That means 36 years passed before Brazilian soccer suffered a collapse this premature again. 36 years gone in a single night in New Jersey. So where does Brazilian soccer go from here? This is the question nobody in Rio or Sao Paulo wants to ask out loud because every possible answer is uncomfortable. Vinicius Junior, at 27 years old, remains one of the most dangerous attackers on the planet when he's fully engaged. Yet he was the most conspicuous absence in the biggest moment of the tournament. Hendrick, at 20 years old, has generational talent but has not yet shown he can carry the full weight of being Brazil's attacking focal point under maximum pressure. Rodrigo, Martinelli, Lucas Paqueta, and Bruno Guimaraes are all excellent individual talents, but none of them have consistently displayed the blend of charisma and cold-blooded efficiency that Neymar brought at his peak. Ancelotti himself was candid about the road ahead in his press conference, saying Brazil needs young talent to step up and that more high-level players need to emerge from the domestic league. He also confirmed his intention to stay on. And on that point, Brazilian soccer politics moved fast this week. Just one day after the elimination, the Brazilian Football Confederation's football director, Rodrigo Caetano, told reporters that Ancelotti will remain in charge of the national team through the 2030 World Cup cycle, honoring the contract extension signed back in May. He is our manager and will be throughout this cycle, Caetano said flatly, shutting down any speculation about an immediate coaching change despite the earliest Brazilian World Cup exit in 36 years. That decision alone has triggered fierce debate across Brazilian sports media this week. Critics argue the federation is once again prioritizing contractual stability and reputation management over accountability, protecting a marquee coaching hire, rather than confronting the tactical and man management questions raised by the Vinicius Junior penalty decision. Supporters of Ancelotti counter that a single bad night, however painful, should not undo a multi-year rebuilding project, and that continuity gives Brazil its best shot at fixing deep structural issues before the next cycle begins in earnest. And this is where soccer stops being just a game and starts brushing up against something bigger. This tournament has unfolded under the shadow of an unusually close relationship between FIFA President Gianni Infantino and the current American President Donald Trump. Reports this month detail that Trump received tens of thousands of dollars worth of World Cup tickets and hospitality from Infantino. Financial disclosures that are now facing scrutiny from lawmakers and watchdog groups, questioning the appropriateness of a sitting head of state receiving lavish gifts tied to an organization his administration is expected to help promote and protect during the tournament's American leg. European lawmakers have separately raised formal complaints regarding Infantino's conduct, adding another layer of controversy to a World Cup that was already being described by commentators as increasingly Trumpified, a phrase used to capture how corporate sponsorship, political access, and soft power have blended into the tournament's presentation on American soil. Infantino has spent much of the past year cultivating this relationship, engaging with Trump more frequently than with almost any other world leader, according to reporting from major outlets covering the build-up to this tournament. Analysts describe the dynamic as mutually beneficial. Trump gains a high-profile global stage to project influence during a politically charged term, while Infantino secures White House backing and favorable treatment for a tournament co-hosted across the United States, Mexico, and Canada. Whether Trump will personally appear for the trophy presentation later this month remains a subject of ongoing speculation among reporters covering the event, with the president notably staying away from several marquee matches earlier in the tournament. For a federation like Brazil's, already fielding criticism over the Ancelotti decision and the handling of Vinicius Junior, the broader political backdrop adds pressure from another direction entirely. Brazilian media outlets have pointed out that FIFA's growing entanglement with American political figures complicates an already tense relationship between South American federations and FIFA leadership, particularly after earlier disputes this year between the Brazilian Federation and FIFA President Infantino over disallowed goals and disciplinary rulings during the group stage. None of this changes what happened on the field, but it frames why so many fans feel this World Cup carries a heavier, more cynical undertone than tournaments past. A sport that prides itself on unpredictability and passion is increasingly being discussed in the same breath as ticket disclosures, political optics, and boardroom politics, rather than purely the drama unfolding between the lines. Back on the pitch, 3 moments define exactly what went wrong for Brazil, and together they explain everything. First, in the 14th minute, with the score still level, Brazil earned a penalty, and Ancelotti chose Bruno Guimaraes over Vinicius Junior, who did not even rank among his own coach's top 5 penalty takers. A decision the manager defended purely through statistics, even as the debate refuses to die down. Second, Hendrick wasted a golden one-on-one chance before Holland struck twice in the 79th and 90th minutes, sending Brazil out with the lowest possession percentage in its World Cup history at 34%. Third, Neymar entered as a substitute, scored a stoppage time penalty, and then announced his retirement from international soccer in tears in the very stadium where his national team journey began 16 years earlier. Those are the facts. What happens now is the far more interesting question. Ancelotti stays, backed by a federation determined to avoid a total reset. Neymar walks away, closing one of the most brilliant and most bittersweet international careers in Brazilian soccer history. Vinicius Junior returns to Madrid under a manager Mourinho, reportedly weighing his long-term future against a hypothetical pursuit of Holland. A storyline made only more intriguing by his own father's ambiguous comments made mid-match. And Brazilian soccer, the most decorated nation in World Cup history, now sits with a 28-year wait for another title, forced to answer a question that has no easy solution, whether a conservative, statistics-driven, defensively minded approach can ever be the formula that returns them to the top of the sport they still claim to have invented. There is also a quieter storyline running underneath all of this, one that Brazilian sports commentators have only started raising in the past day or two. According to several reports from South American outlets, tension had been building inside the Brazilian camp even before the Norway match. stemming from the earlier disallowed goal controversy involving Vinicius Junior during the group stage, and a formal letter the Brazilian Federation reportedly sent to FIFA President Infantino contesting the officiating. Some commentators have floated the idea, still unconfirmed and very much in the realm of speculation, that lingering frustration over that episode may have subtly affected trust between the coaching staff and certain players heading into the knockout rounds. Nothing here has been officially verified by the Federation, and it should be treated as background noise rather than established fact. But it adds another layer to a locker room story that already had plenty of tension before a ball was even kicked against Norway. What is confirmed, however, is the shape of the road ahead for both teams involved in this match. Norway now advances to face England in the quarterfinals, a matchup that will be played in front of one of the largest global television audiences of the tournament. Given Norway's status as one of the great feel-good stories of this World Cup and Holland's current standing atop the scoring charts. For a country that had not reached this stage of a World Cup in decades, simply being here already qualifies as a historic achievement, regardless of what happens next. For Brazil, the road ahead is murkier and considerably more complicated. Ancelotti has publicly framed the defeat as fuel for what he calls a new cycle, language that suggests the Federation intends to treat this tournament as a transitional moment rather than a failure requiring wholesale change. Whether Brazilian fans, media, and sponsors are willing to accept that framing over the next 4 years remains an open question, particularly with a golden generation of attacking talent that many believe is running out of time to deliver the one trophy that has defined the sport's biggest stage since 1958.